Hey everybody, welcome back to Puppet Masters and Castle Freaks, the internet's leading all things Charles Band podcast. I am one of your hosts, Jared Hornbeck, and I am coming to you from the neon nightmare of Brooklyn, New York. But no, I am not the only one who is sitting down to bring you an incredibly entertaining bonus episode. No, who else is here with me?
Well, hey, it's Steve Guntley coming to you from Austin, Texas. Excited to be here for this episode. Every once in a while, we get the opportunity to bring on somebody who has worked within the Full Moon vicinity, or even more broadly has kind of worked in low-budget B-movie horror, which we always love to hear the stories from the trenches from anybody who is getting involved in that. And we have a very exciting guest joining us for this special bonus episode. Please, I'll pass it over to you, Brad. Please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your experience.
Hi, I'm happy to be here. I'm Brad Sykes. I'm a independent writer, director, producer, and also author. Been working in the business professionally since 96, 97. I've made over 30 features. And actually, I got my start working for Full Moon. That was one of the very first companies that I worked for when I first moved to Los Angeles.
Well, like any respectable filmmaker, you have done your time in the film industry, kind of doing PA work, kind of working behind the scenes in pretty much every little level. And so that's kind of the way to go. So is that kind of how you got your start with Full Moon, was working as like a production assistant, or what was your initial role?
Well, my very first job was as a director's assistant.
Oh,
I mean, this I'll tell you how this goes back. It goes back to Jeff Burr, who's a director you've probably heard of.
Yep.
Yeah.
Leatherface and Stepfather 2 and a bunch of other films. And he's obviously done a lot of things for Full Moon.
Yeah, Puppet Master 4 and 5.
Exactly. Yeah, those were the first ones he did. I met Jeff in 96. Actually, my very first trip to LA. I was a film student at Boston University. I think it was in my third year. And my very first trip to LA, never been to LA before. I was literally crashing on the couch of a friend, my only contact in LA, my former babysitter. And I had a couple meetings set up with some people, which actually I did end up getting those jobs, which are kind of like internships on Kiss the Girls was one of them, that Morgan Freeman movie.
Oh yeah, the James.
That's actually the first movie job I ever had. Then I worked for Scott Free, for Ridley Scott's company.
Oh, cool.
As a reader. Those were actually the people I was in town to meet. But Kristen, my friend, we were just talking, driving around Hollywood Boulevard, literally, and talking about, I said, how much I like horror movies, and she said, "Oh, I know a guy who's made some horror movies. I'm working on a movie for him right now. What's his name?" "Oh, you would never heard of him. He's done one of the Texas Chainsaw movies." I'm like, of course, Toby Hooper is my first thought, and then she's like, "No, I said Jeff Burr." "Yeah, Jeff Burr." So anyway, I met Jeff through Kristen, and Jeff literally, keep in mind, I was only in LA for like 3 or 4 days. I met with Jeff, had a great time with him, and he said, "You want to meet Charlie Band? I'm going to take you over to meet him tomorrow." Because I had been a Full Moon fan. This is important. I grew up with Empire films. I saw Metal Storm in the theater when I was a kid.
Well, it's like High Noon at the edge of the
I like that movie more than the Star Wars movies, actually.
Metal Storm is really fun.
I love Metal Storm. The guy with the hook, the 3D, or the the arm, the metal arm. Eliminators. I saw these movies in the theater.
Out of curiosity, as a young fan of Metal Storm, did you see the new Fall Guy movie with Ryan Gosling?
I did, and that annoyed me tremendously.
It annoyed you? Oh, okay, I was curious if you had like
because I'll tell you why it annoyed me, because I feel like the filmmakers had no concept. They just used that title. They're not fans of Metal Storm.
Yeah, the title and the tagline directly.
Yeah, they just swiped it. They just swiped it. I didn't appreciate that. But
it's interesting. It's interesting to get that perspective, because it's like, you obviously are a little bit closer tied to the source material than we are.
Yeah.
And so for us, it was kind of like the Leonardo DiCaprio gif of pointing at the TV.
Right.
When you saw that, but it's always.
But I don't know that the filmmakers would acknowledge that. I don't know if anyone ever has from that side. Have they? I mean, I think they just lifted it.
Yeah, not that I remember. Yeah, I think it might have just been like
lifted it. They just
like
lifted it.
Like it could have been a placeholder name almost, and then someone knew enough to say, "Oh, there's actually a movie called Metal Storm," and then they saw the poster and the tagline and went, "Well, no one remembers that movie."
No
So
one
we can
remembers that, right? Of course. Well, I do. I mean, like I said, it was literally probably one of the early film going experiences in my life. I mean,
Yeah.
that's one of the first movies I remember seeing in the theater. Let's put it that way. So,
Mm.
Transfers and all those movies were definitely big for me, whether
Sure.
on video or cable or in the theater. So Full Moon was big for me too in high school, and I was a big fan of the movies. I saw all of them and collected. I was already kind of collecting posters and stuff like that. And so anyway, I knew what all this stuff was. And so Jeff said, "You want to meet Charlie Band?" I'm like, "Of course, I can't believe it." So he actually took me over to Full Moon. And that was when they were in Glendale. This is like before, this is in 96. So I remember they had props from like the giant what are that?
Baby
Oopsie
Oopsie
Daisy.
Daisy.
That thing. They
Yeah.
had that giant prop because they had made
Oof.
Dollman versus Demonic Toy. Actually, I'll tell you what movie they were filming at the time: Craw the Sea Monster.
Oh, sure. Yeah, we haven't
have
covered
not covered
those
that
yet.
one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
see, you guys are the right people to tell these things to other people. Are like, what's that? Well, you guys know.
Oh no, we're eagerly anticipating them. Yeah.
So they had that. They were literally in the process of. They were always doing something back then, and they were in the process of doing that. Jeff took me in. I actually met Charlie. I met Albert Band. They were extremely nice. Met a few other folks, and for all I know, that could have been the end of it. But that was pretty cool in itself. Then, cut to about a year later, and I was graduating college, and I kept in touch with Jeff, and Jeff called me up and said, "Do you want to work on a movie for me? You want to work as my assistant on a movie? I'm doing this movie called Spoiler. This is a sci-fi movie with Gary Daniels, if you know who he is, like a martial arts."
Yeah, I remember
Hmm.
Gary Daniels. Yeah. Was he
Yeah,
an
there were-
American Ninja at some point?
He might have been. He's
Yeah.
a lot of PM Entertainment movies, and just a lot of stuff in general. And so anyway, that was the first thing I worked with Jeff on. On that movie, there was a Romanian DP named Viorel Sergovic, who you may have seen his name. He shot many movies for Full Moon in the 90s, like Witch House, other things for Dave Dakota, lots of stuff. And Jeff had worked with him in Romania prior to this, and he wanted Viorel to shoot that movie. Spoiler.
Mhm.
But it wouldn't work because of the union. The unions wouldn't let him. So now Viorel is, basically stuck in LA for like 3 weeks, wondering what's he going to do, during this time. And I'm there. And Jeff said, "Why don't you guys direct second unit?" Sure. We had a Panavision camera. This was terrific. I mean, I was just out of film school, And Jeff was a super nice guy, as you can probably already tell. Extremely nice and encouraging.
We've heard a lot of people who've worked with him.
You won't hear
remember him very
anything
fondly.
bad about him. You won't hear anything bad, and you
No,
shouldn't.
we haven't to this point.
He's one of the most gracious and just a wonderful guy who loved to put people together. He liked to put people together and let them kind of go do stuff and encourage them. So that's what he did with me and Viorel, and we worked well together on that. So then he said, "Well, if you seem like you guys work so well together, you get along. I think you'd like Romania. I think you'd like them," because Jeff knew, this is in May, June of 97. Jeff knew he was going to be going over there to direct a movie called Phantom Town, which was like one of their kids' movies they were doing. And so, long story short, although I'm probably giving you a long story, although this is the setup to the whole thing.
Hey, that's what we're here for.
Yeah. Jeff brought me on to Phantom Town, and also as his assistant. I was supposed to direct second unit on Phantom Town. That didn't end up panning out, but that's okay. But I did go over there. I went over to Romania to work on that movie, and so, that was just an incredible experience. I mean, I can tell you whatever you guys want if you want to hear anything specific about it, but that was one of the kids' movies they did. They shot on the Western Town set that Oblivion was built for Oblivion.
Love that set.
Yeah, that was like Oblivion was the first one they built it for that, and then they used it a lot for other movies.
Petticoat Planet was a memorable
use of that.
Viorel shot that movie, Petticoat Planet.
Oh yeah, that's awesome.
He was shooting a lot of movies for Dave Dakota in particular. That was kind of how it started, was with Dakota, and then Dakota would recommend him to other directors because he was good and fast and just a fun guy, a young guy, who knew how to shoot movies in 12 days, 18 days, whatever, the schedules we had back then.
what I like so far about this conversation, and because, we've been doing the show for a while, we're at, almost 170 episodes. Obviously, Charles Band's filmography, when you look at everything he produced or put his name on, it's pretty vast. So we have a lot more to go. But already in the short time that we've been talking, we've hit on like Kra, the sea monster, which is one that's just like has been sort of on the back burner of like, no one's really picked it yet. We haven't pushed it up in rotation yet for us to cover. And then this one, Phantom Town too. I don't, maybe it was yesterday, was looking down the list of remaining titles, and I saw Phantom Town and went, oh yeah, there's this other kind of Western Moonbeam movie. We end up doing, I feel like Moonbeam movies kind of get the short shrift because they're not generally what people pick.
Right.
Like, when we give them the option to. And so occasionally, like, Steve and I would be like, all right, well, maybe we should just like do a couple of weeks with no guests and just kind of bang out a few of these. But like Phantom Town was one I was just thinking about. So already, a lot of times we have these conversations and it starts talking about some of the heavy hitters. Oh, we were over there doing this movie and this movie. We've got two like obscure yet to be covered ones already mentioned in this. So I love that. I love that we're going a little bit deeper. And I also have to say, I'm a fan of Jeff Burr's Pumpkinhead 2 Blood Wings.
Yeah.
It's nice to hear that people are fans of his stuff now, of those titles in particular. But boy, were those movies trashed back then. And Jeff actually had a real hard time getting work. It was not in a good place, and
that was arguably the lowest industry ebb of horror. Was that stretch when he was most active? It was like late 80s to mid 90s until like Scream kind of revitalized things. Like that was a tough time to be working in horror.
That's exactly what a lot of the guys that I became friends with worked on things with, like Jeff or Tony Hickox or Courtney Joyner, other people. That's exactly when they were trying to branch out and trying to get up, go up the ladder.
It's funny.
Instead of people being appreciative of it, there was a lot of negativity about those movies. Now I hear, I love Pumpkinhead too. I love that. I never heard that back then.
The tides have to a lot of these movies have been reappraised because we're talking about Jeff Burr. I have always championed Leatherface Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3. I always have enjoyed it. I've said, maybe like it's obviously not the first one, and the second one is divisive, but has an insane frantic energy to it that I like, and I know people who don't like it, but like it's divisive. And I actually think I think part 3 is really good. And you named Anthony Hickox too. I'm a defender of Hellraiser 3. I love Hellraiser 3.
Hellraiser 3 is my favorite Hellraiser. It's my favorite Hellraiser, unambiguously.
It's weird. I mean, not to go off on tangents here, but Tony's someone I met later on and worked with on another thing that didn't end up getting made. But Tony and Jeff had like a lot of the same. They were even offered some of the same projects. Actually, Jeff was offered Hellraiser 3 and turned it down to make an independent movie. There were a lot of weird cross currents going on there between the two of them. They were more or less a lot of the same jobs were kind of coming up between the two of them, and had some parallel, not all completely the same, but some parallel things going on. There were a lot of sequels and that kind of stuff, but that's kind of what was out there for people back then,
Yeah.
But Phantom Town was one of, I think, 4 or 5 kids movies they did back to back over there that summer. It was literally like, and because I don't want to jump ahead too much, but I ended up working on another one of them, Shrunken City, which was kind of like the first one, but then we had to go back and shoot some more for it. But talking about Phantom Town, it was also shot on the stage. It was 18 days, a lot of night shoots, which was kind of difficult for everyone. There were, maybe like, the Americans, it was just, the American actors basically, and effects people. And Jeff, of course, and so it was probably about 10 of us or so, but everybody else was Romanian. But Jeff kind of knew his way around it because he'd already made at least 2 movies over there. He made a Werewolf Reborn, which was a fun little movie. And he did what was the other thing called? Josh Kirby.
Yeah.
It was one of those another kids movie. This was all like from the year before, I think.
So Brad, were these movies different than the like Canaram production movies that were happening at that time? Because you were saying
you're talking about the American stuff that came later. That
'Cause
was
those
later. That was
okay.
later. Actually, what I'll tell you exactly how it happened. The Phantom Town and those films were actually Kushner Locke was a partner on those, and I don't know how
Right.
that broke down financially, but they were a partner. Peter Locke, who produced Hills Have Eyes, the original Hills Have Eyes, Flesh Gordon, and other movies, his son was in the movie. His son was in Phantom Town.
Oh,
And so I got to meet Peter Locke, and he gave me a set of Hills Have Eyes lobby cards at the end of the shoot.
that's cool.
That was kind of cool. I mean, so Jeff had to go through Kushner Locke, though, I remember, for every casting decision, and sometimes they didn't see eye to eye. We did all the casting at Full Moon, but then the final final round had to be through Kushner Locke. So they were a partner on all those movies. Now that summer. Now I think what happened was, I think the next group they did was with a Canadian partner. And
Yeah.
I honestly, I haven't seen any of those movies. I wasn't really interested.
Yeah, because I was
But they were like
thinking
another kids movies group.
I was thinking they were part of that same group, because I was thinking of like some of the ones we covered, like Teenage Space Vampires and
Right. I know what you're
Teen
talking about.
Sorcery and those.
Yeah,
But it
yeah,
sounds
yeah.
like that's a second crop of
Those were literally, I think, the
Romanian
next
shot.
year, maybe even the
Yeah.
summer of the next year. I don't know how they did that, but yeah, those were a different. Kushner Locke, I think, had exited the picture by maybe the end of '97. I don't know. I mean, they were definitely around for those movies anyway, and a few others, I think.
Hmm.
Well,
and I have to say, we're in the late '90s now, where you're making movies for Full Moon, you're getting your early jobs as a production assistant, even like assisting directing on some of these things. So there is sort of an elephant in the room we need to bring up, and this is on a recent episode of ours. We covered a movie that was not well received on the show by me, by Steve, by our guest. But it is, it's out there, and it is a movie that you did work on early in your career, and it is called The Killer Eye.
mm-hmm.
And Steve and I think, I don't want to speak for him, but I think I understand how we do this. Anytime there's a movie like this where something just doesn't work for us, like in our opinion, getting to then talk to someone who was there, who has some insight to, because we do a lot of speculation about why certain decisions are made on set or why they do things certain ways. So I am fascinated to hear a little bit about what the production of The Killer Eye was like. And I know that Steve is too, I think.
Yeah.
I wish I had more to say about that. I mean, that was something that, when was that? In 99?
99 was the release. Yeah.
I'm just thinking about when we filmed it, like you always think in terms of when you shot it, not when like the actual release date was. Because like Phantom Town took 2 years to come out, for example. Like, I mean, we shot it in the summer of '97. It came out in '99 at some point.
Yeah.
Killer Eye was, I kind of, because after Phantom Town, we came back and I kept in touch with some people over there, and they brought me on to a few shows that were in LA. Killer Eye was one of those. I knew Dave Dakota socially for a while. Actually, I met him. It's actually funny. This is just how the business was, at least back then, how the business was. I mentioned that movie Spoiler with Gary Daniels. Mm-hmm. Well, that was one of 3 sci-fi movies that were all shot on the same stages, where they would just swap out the pieces and repaint them and move them around. And there were 3 movies shot in a row, and Dave Dakota directed one of those movies. What was that movie called? I can't remember, but I remember Luka Berkovich directed the other one, who did Ghoulies. So there were a lot of Full Moon alumni or Charlie Band alumni there. So I met Dakota back then, and then I just met him. I just kind of would see him from time to time in different gatherings. So I knew him, but that was the first movie, only movie of his I worked on. They just called me up one day and said, "Hey, do you want to come down and work on this?" And it was literally, I'll tell you one thing about that movie. It was shot in 4 days.
That's what we read in some of our research. They were saying this might be the shortest production cycle.
It was not only the shortest shoot as far as features go that I've ever worked on. It's also the shortest days I've ever had on a movie. I think the days on that movie were 10 hours, which is incredibly short for a low budget movie, especially a movie shot in 4 days. And that was with pre-lighting. I'll never forget. It was like unbelievably, because I've made later on, and actually even before that and later on, I've directed movies that were made in 6 days. And that was considered ridiculous. And these were on film, which, if you know anything about film, that's a whole nother level of technical work that has to go into that. And it takes longer anyway, but 6 days. Anyway, I've done 6-day features. But 4 days, Crazy. And 10 hours of pre-lighting. I'll always remember that. It was the shortest shoot. I mean, it was pleasant. It was all done. I'll tell you where that was done. It was done at a place called Lacey Street Studios, where they also did Shrieker, I remember.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And because I talked to Dakota about that for something else, something I wanted to do or something. I think I was looking for a space. That was a place where a lot of low-budget movies. Although, what also shot there was Saw later on, the first Saw. It gives you an idea that Saw was a lower budget movie, maybe not as low budget as these, but still they were at Lacey Street. That's all I really remember. I mean, some of the effects guys on that, Chris Bergschneider, I'd worked with on Phantom Town. He and his partner were operating that killer eye prop, but the actual killer eye was made by a guy who had died, effects guy who died of cancer.
Oh.
A lot of the effects guys, that's a very toxic business, literally toxic.
Yeah.
Toxic, and talking about toxic environments, it's toxic from the chemical standpoint. And a lot of those guys, like David Allen, passed away too.
Right.
I met him too briefly, and not long after that, he died. So anyway, you get the idea. There was a guy named Mark Williams who had built that. So he had done a lot of things. And so Chris and Jeff were operating the killer eye, but that they hadn't built it. And they told everybody that this was built by our friend Mark Williams, who passed away. So all that must have happened like really right before the shoot, maybe.
Well, that's interesting to hear, because I was thinking with a 4-day shoot with like pressure to kind of wrap this thing up quickly, like you would think it would be a really kind of stressful sort of period.
I'll tell you how they did it.
Sounds like a show.
No, it wasn't like that at all. Dakota's shoots are never like that. They're very well-oiled machines. The way they did it, the way they got all that coverage done, or got all those. Well, first of all, the movie's like an hour long. I mean, it's a pretty very short feature. It's kind of one of those, almost like predates a lot of the stuff they do now. That's like 59 minutes or whatever. It was short. But the other thing, the way they did it is they put the camera on what's called a jib arm, and so basically within a scene, let's say a regular dialogue scene, you would usually cover that by masters, close-ups, and you would take the camera and move it, and you do different setup, what you call setups in regular movie. And you could still do that pretty quickly, but this was even quicker because it was on this arm that was kind of a free-floating, kind of like a Steadicam type of deal. Only it was mounted on an arm, the C-stand, or whatever, an arm off the C-stand. And it would just move around from actor to actor and kind of float around. And that's how he and the DP accomplished that. All that coverage was almost like not really doing coverage. It was almost like, we'll just float over to this guy, then we'll kind of pull it back, then we'll go forward again. And you could do a scene, you could do a lot of pages very quickly that way. That's how that was done. That's how it was done in 4 days. With pre-lighting. I mean, I always say that, but it just blew me away that the pre-lighting was part of that 10 hours. So it was probably more like almost like an 8-hour a day.
Yeah, that's wild. There was an anecdote from friend of the show, Jeff Farley, one of the killer eye operators, saying how like he thought they were going to be there all day, and he was home in time for dinner each day.
Well, I'm telling the truth, and it's been corroborated by Jeff. I worked with Jeff on like 4 or 5 things, and he did effects for me on one of my movies later on that I directed. So yeah, I've known him for a while.
Shout out to Jeff. Yeah, he's awesome. Yeah, it was
and shout out also, we're talking a little bit about not exactly the first Killer Eye, but I posted in the Facebook group when that episode came out, we had covered it with the sequel, the Halloween Haunt. And in my little blurb of it, kind of led on to the fact that we don't ever really like drag movies through the mud, but we were not particularly positive about that one as we are.
Oh, that's terrible. That movie's terrible. I actually saw that one time. I was just curious. Obviously, as a sequel to a movie you work on, you're like, well, how did the sequel come out? It was just a clip. Wasn't it more like they're just sitting around watching The Killer Eye?
For a large portion of that movie. It was like a bunch of girls
or guys or whatever. They were sitting around just watching TV.
They are.
Like, this hit a new low. I mean, that was a low.
I know. And then I posted about it, and then Danny Draven commented and was like, hey, I edited that. And I was like, well, we still love you.
It's a job. It's a job. I mean,
that's what he wrote back. He's like, I needed a paycheck.
And we really try to be, we never like pick on the people who are making these movies, because there's a tremendous amount of pressure to turn around a movie that quickly. And the fact that any movie gets made at all is miraculous. Just given that the crazy strictures and the way that the business runs. So like, we're never gonna ding anybody for working on any movie like that.
And
Yeah.
all of the people that we've interviewed about it, like we've talked about these specific movies, like Dave Parker and Danny Draven and Sam Irvin, and I
Mhm.
mean, and Ted. I mean, even Ted Nicolau has some, maybe in his filmography he's not as proud of. They all have a good sense of humor about it. We talk about a movie they made 30 years ago, one not being covered by many current podcasts, I don't think, but also like they're always happy to talk about it. And I feel like Steve and I would tiptoe a little bit through it to be like, okay, like we recognize that maybe the movie doesn't fully work, so we're very charitable with our language, and then all of them will just come right out and just be like, no, it's just bad. You could say it, it's bad.
Well, that's actually why, all the names that you just mentioned, I know all those guys. I mean, they are realistic about what they're doing, and they do know, and that's why they kept working too, because they're not super precious sometimes about things. They know when certain things are more like an assignment versus a personal movie.
Yeah.
And I think that the thing about Charlie Band is like I think Jeff Burr definitely took this approach, because I saw him on other films where things got more intense and heated in terms of like creative clashing. I think Jeff, number one, he knew what he was doing. He knew what he was going into. But he also knew, and this is frankly to Charlie's credit, I think he leaves directors alone to a large degree more than other producers in the industry, let's just say. Because I mean that was my experience, because he trusts them to do the job. And I don't think there's a tremendous amount of meddling or creative clashing going on. Also, there was just so much product coming out that there wasn't time to do all that. But yet some people will meddle. Some people are, I mean, I saw that happen with Jeff on a lot of movies. That's why he's took his name off a lot of movies. He's, however, never took his name off anything he directed for Full Moon. I think that's worth bringing up. So I think, and also I know Jeff was having fun making those movies because there were fun people involved, whether it was here or in LA or in Romania. He was having fun. They were fun. That was a fun. In fact, Phantom Town's one of the best times I've ever had on the movie set ever. Before or since, my whole career. It's one of the moments. I mean, I met my wife on that movie. So
No kidding.
my future wife. Yeah, she was. Josephine was a film student, like interning on the movie, like 1 year younger than me, and I was, just out of film school. So we're more or less at the same level. And they brought some film students over to work on this American movie, see what the Americans do this. And I remember she told me she was scared because she thought all directors are yellers and they're going to be whatever. And Jeff was the opposite. He was like, oh no, let me see. I want to see your short films. He was like the opposite of that. And
Cool.
set such a great, no, he is cool. He was such a cool guy. I mean, so of course we're talking about him. I talk about him like he's still here. He passed away a few years ago. And I'm still kind of not quite over that. He had a huge, huge influence on my life and work. And actually my new movie is dedicated to him.
Oh, that's nice. That's nice.
Yeah, because the whole Romanian thing, anyway, none of that would have ever happened. So he's one of those life-changing people you meet, actually.
And you were kind of in a position where you're cutting your teeth and you're learning the fundamentals of filmmaking on a Full Moon set. Did you take any lessons from your experience at Full Moon or working with this group of people into your own like directorial efforts?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and the other one I didn't talk about was a movie called Murder Cycle.
We haven't covered that yet.
That was more of a, I don't want to say a real movie, but it was more like a bigger shoot with, it was 10 days, but it was compared to Killer Eye, it felt like a much bigger film with action, stunts, things blowing up.
Yeah.
Tom Calloway was the DP and director on that. I also had met Tom before too, because he worked with Jeff. You see, there's all the continuum between all these people.
Oh yeah.
I learned a lot. No, but to answer your question, I learned a heck of a lot. I mean, and I'll tell you why, because when I worked on Kiss the Girls, it was a big movie that there were a lot of people and you're kept away from, the set basically. When you're PA on a movie like that, you're like, you could be what's called locking up, where you're like just off away from everything and not letting anyone walk into the shot. I mean, you're not even around it so much.
You're kind of invisible at that point.
Yeah, more or less. Yeah. That's almost like your job is to be invisible sometimes.
You're just there to make sure that people don't walk in Christian Bale's sightline.
Well, things like that. I mean, like I remember we being like a hospital shooting and, like everybody's on one floor and they don't want anybody to come up the stairwell to come walk in the middle of the long take. So you're standing on that stairwell, an empty stairwell, make sure no one walks in that door. Well, you're not really getting involved in the process, let's just say, or even observing the process. Right. But that's okay. I enjoyed doing that. That was a great experience. But working with Jeff was completely different because he would, put me in charge of second unit. So right away you're learning like in shooting inserts, shooting out sets. You watch him work, you see about how coverage is shot. You see how things can be done quickly too. How to make a movie in 18 days. I make a movie, whatever. Working with actors. I remember on Phantom Town, I actually got to write a scene that's in the movie because they had this actor, this Native American guy who had been in a lot of things. I think he might have been Dances with Wolves or whatever. But anyway, he was there for an extra day. For whatever reason, he just ended up being there for an extra day. And they said, we got this guy here. Let's write a scene for him, extra scene. And who's going to do that? Well, Brad can do that, So they sent me away and I wrote this scene real quick. And I went in the saloon set for the Western Town and wrote the scene. And they filmed it. And I remember, when we were filming it, I had some thoughts about it. And Jeff told me, this is how this is done. And this is, if the actor doesn't know their lines that well. Anyway, I learned a lot, technically and artistically. I couldn't have had a better teacher. So actually those films, those full moon films I learned more on those movies than I did in 4 years of film school. I'm sure that's the kind of thing people always say about Corman and things like that, but actually it's true.
Oh,
and
yeah.
It was good for me to learn that stuff when I did, because I hadn't directed. I'd only done some like amateur features before that. I hadn't directed anything professional. So it was very, very useful and helpful for me going into directing, my first like features out here, to have that experience, to just the nuts and bolts of it sometimes. And also, I'll tell you, and then way later in the future, I directed a sci-fi horror movie called Plaguers.
Mm-hmm.
And that was all on stages, all on sets, which actually Full Moon had used back in the day. And that experience on Spoiler was like a huge help for that, because it was sci-fi, it was set on sets. That's a different type of filmmaking than shooting on location. You're actually more restricted in a lot of ways. Anyway, so yeah, I did learn.
You're more restricted, you're saying, when you're shooting on sets?
Yeah, you are, because, a movie like that, which was like Spoiler, was like a 18-day movie, maybe a little more, maybe like 14 days, whatever it was, all on sets, with a lot of green screen. And some green screen and like through the cockpit of a, that kind of thing, and a few scenes where like an airlock door opens up and you see space through there. Well, you can't just turn the camera any old place, because you're going to see off the set, you're going to see a crew member, you're going to see a C-stand, whereas and sometimes you do, and you do another take, and with green screen, it's extremely limiting.
Sure.
With shooting on location, you can just turn the camera pretty much anywhere and everyone follows along with that. And the more stripped down it is, the better, because then you don't have to worry about so many crews standing around. So,
yeah,
so that's
I
why it's
noticed
limiting.
that. It's funny you mention it, and I guess I thought about it because we do talk about movies that are clearly used on repurposed sets. And it's like, you have to be creative with, I think, how you shoot on them. Because I'm thinking of like, like a movie like Creepazoids, where it's like, you can tell it's like that this set has been used in a lot of different things, or the really super cheap, Tim Kincaid, urban classics, or maybe urban classics ones,
like Breeders or something like that.
Breeders and Mutant Hunt and Robot Holocaust, especially with that incredible matte painting.
Those are like just shot in like, I've seen those movies too. Those are kind of like, the bare bone. Calling that futuristic or sci-fi is to me stretching it. It's really, this is like the sets we shot Plaguers on were built in the 90s, and they've been used. They're standing sets. They look like Alien. If you ever see the movie, it looks like Alien. It has that aesthetic, or maybe you could even say a Wynorski film or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
But we built additional things onto it. You know what I mean? Like we built like maybe 4 or 5 other rooms on the thing. But anyway, it was a great place to shoot a movie. But yeah, and Charlie had shot things there, but generally they hadn't shot entire movies there. Nobody ever shot. I think I'm the only one who shot an entire film there. Crazy enough to do that.
Oh, wow.
Like,
Wow.
Yeah. Like the whole thing, like all in. And we did miniatures too, like old school miniatures they had built. And we did all the miniature work on the green screen, and all that kind of stuff. It's a
well, it's funny you talk about Romania, and obviously like Romania is such a huge part of Full Moon, be it like in the Paramount era or even still into the Kushner lock. So what do you, I know when we talked, we've had Ted Nicolau, Denise Duff, Kevin Spiritus talking about their experiences in Romania. So if someone says to you, "Oh, you worked for Full Moon in Romania for a little bit," what's kind of the first memory of the working conditions there that comes to mind?
Well, I will say, I mean, I had a wonderful time. I know that like on those subspecies films, especially like the first one, and probably the second and third as well, they were shooting more on location, and they were shooting at the very beginning of the whole era where things hadn't been really built. The infrastructure was pretty poor.
Yeah.
And I know they had a lot more trouble with everything, from what I've read, what I've heard. By the time we got over there in 97, because they were probably making those movies in 91,
Mm-hmm.
right after 89, really. I mean, 90, 91, 92. So by the time we got there, we shot the entire movie at a sound stage. I mean, that was Castell Studios. It was in the woods. It was actually like in a forest that had been kind of carved out for the studio. And there were 3 stages. One of them, you guys would love this actually. One of them had the names of all the directors who had made movies there painted into the side of it.
Oh, I love that.
So, and I've actually got
Cool.
video of that. I'll send you, Jared, I'll send you a link at some point. I have a making of from Phantom Town that one of the actors shot and edited from that time, and I've uploaded it. It's on YouTube now for anybody to see. And in that video, you'll see the wall with all the, Ted and all those guys' names up there. That's been whitewashed, painted over now, unfortunately.
Oh,
Yeah, but time marches on. But that was the early years, and everybody was very excited. And so anyway, so those were like 3 stages, and then the Western Town, which was a long boulevard kind of a thing, with all the buildings off on the side. So we had an easier time of it because everything was filmed there. We didn't go on location. Like we even built a gas station set just for the movie. That the family they stop the car on the way, one of those kind of like out of the way, like
Yeah.
something in Leatherface, out of the way convenience store, gas station. So everything was under one roof. So we had an easier time of it. But my experiences were great, just great. I have nothing bad to say. The crew was fun. They're good people, experienced people who actually worked on a lot of movies. They just, but they hadn't worked on movies like this,
yeah.
with all the special effects and the creatures and all that kind of stuff. And all the Americans that are over there were cool too. I mean,
No, that's awesome. I definitely think I'm glad that some of these things that have happened, I'm glad that so this is another Full Moon thing, and I think Charlie was kind of ahead of the curve on this too, which he's been on a lot of things, which is those video zones.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, they're the first making of featurettes.
Yeah,
I mean, they're the supplemental materials that everybody has now.
Like a lot of behind the scenes stuff, a
Yep.
lot of footage of production shoots, kind of very candid stuff. And it's like those are the kind of features that you look for now, especially as people are getting back into collecting physical media again.
Mm-hmm.
It's like if you're going to look at somebody like Vinegar Syndrome or Visual Vengeance, or even like a bigger company like Shout Factory, or any of those, or the 101 or 88 films in the UK. I think, there's some movies that people are just discovering. And one of the sad things is that there is no real documentation of those movies. And some of them are to the point where the cast and crew are no longer among us. You can't get people together for supplemental features.
Right.
And I'm always fascinated. I have friends who work on production of supplementals, and hearing them talk about people they're interviewing for this thing or the box set they're working on is always super interesting. Now, I mentioned Visual Vengeance, my buddy Matt Desiderio's label.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that was put out on Visual Vengeance that I've got right here,
there
Brad,
we go.
the Scream Queen.
There we go. You beat me to it.
Yeah. So I was going to say, talk a little bit about, this movie, this shot on video movie that you made with Linnea Quigley.
That was my very first professional writing and directing job in LA. Like I said, I'd made 8 shot on video movies before coming here in Virginia and Boston. And I was working on another film for this producer, and he was doing smaller movies on the side. And he knew I'd made some little movies, and he said, well, if you want to do something, and then what have you got? Can you pitch me some things? And I pitched him Scream Queen. And the idea was kind of a meta horror movie, actually. This is in 97, actually, end of 97, because we shot it in 98. And I pitched it, and he liked it. So we went ahead and started moving forward with that. And I thought of Linnea Quigley for playing the lead, but I didn't know if I would really actually get her, because this was a really low budget movie, even lower budget than other things she was doing. And so actually I went to my friend Courtney Joyner, who you probably heard of him. He did Lurking Fear. And so I knew Courtney through Jeff Burr. See, it all kind of goes back to that. And so Courtney called up Linnea, and he told her about me and the movie. And so I met with her, gave her the script, and she liked it a lot. And she agreed to do it. So yeah, we made that movie in like the early 98. I remember it was kind of crazy, because I was directing out here for the first time, and kind of we had a real short schedule, probably a Killer Eye type schedule. And we had Linnea for a few days. And one of the things with Linnea was at the time, she had recorded a song called This Chainsaw Is Made for Cutting. That was kind of like a Nancy Sinatra, parody. And she wanted a music video for that. And so that was kind of part of the thing was, hey, I'll be in your movie, but I want you to do a music video. Gee, darn, do I want to do a Linnea Quigley music video? Yeah, you don't have to twist my arm to do that. So we had fun. We made the movie, and then we did the music video like after that.
That's so funny. It's like, oh, yeah, sure, I'll be in your movie, but on one condition, that you shoot my entire horror workout video.
Yeah, it was kind of like that. Actually, it's funny. We used props from the horror workout in the music video, as a matter of fact. We went to her house because she was super nice, and I remember going over there a lot of times and just picking up photos and other things, and would hang out. And we even shot parts of the movie in her house, as a matter of fact. And when we did the music video, we needed body parts. The girls were there was like a backup band with girls with like zombie arms and stuff like that. And she's like, oh, I've got some zombie arms back. Let me check on this. Is from Horror Workout, And she went back there and grabbed like a leg and an arm, and she still had them around, I guess, from the Horror Workout all back in the day. Just wonderful to work with. And we actually, you're talking about supplemental materials, when we did that Blu-ray you just showed, I did get in touch with her about that, because they were actually having a hard time. The distributor was having a hard time getting a hold of her. And I said, well, I'll contact her. And she and I had talked off and on. We were always wondering, is this movie ever going to be released? Because we made it in 98, and it would like almost get released every once in a while. There would be like a point where somebody would do artwork or commission extras or whatever, a commentary, and then nothing would happen. The bottom would fall out. But then when Visual Vengeance got in touch, which I'd done things, because they're a company through Wild Eye. They're like a sister company to Wild Eye. And I've been in business with Wild Eye since 2012, 2013. And when they told me they had Scream Queen, I was like, great, Scream Queen is finally going to come out. 25 years. It ended up coming out 25 years after we shot it. It was completed in 2001, but took another 24 years to get like a really legitimate release. But that can happen with movies sometimes.
Yeah.
And it got, a really beautiful Blu-ray.
Oh yeah, I love it. And almost in some ways it was worth the wait, because it's such a nice package that, I love everything about it. I love the cover art. The booklet, and we did all the extras. In fact, I do a lot of supplemental materials here. We do a lot of those on the side. For my old films, because I've got a bunch of other things with Visual Vengeance that are going to come out through them, and so on.
Awesome.
So yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, no, it's
really glad to have it out there.
No, it's awesome, and Visual Vengeance is really out there. They're doing the Lord's work in the sense of like the people need to see more Mark Polonia movies.
I like one that they put out that I always liked was The Abomination.
The Abomination.
I remember that movie. Yeah.
That was a movie that, like, when I was starting to make features, like with my friends with on High 8 Video, The Abomination was one that we rented, and I was like, this is cool. This is, yeah, it's cool and it's inspiring because it makes you feel like you can go out and make a movie. Movies like that would come out occasionally in the 90s that people would push through the system because it was a lot harder back then and get them into the stores, So anyway, I was happy to see that Rob released The Abomination. He's got some other good ones too. He's got a lot of stuff coming up. I mean, I'm not going to talk about it extensively, but frankly, I shouldn't talk too much because these things take a long time sometimes to develop and to get across the finish line. But when they do, I think people are really happy to see them because there's a lot of care put into the release, so.
Yeah, I think boutique labels have been doing an incredible job. Like I recently got the 101 Films Sorority Babes and the Slimeball Bolorama box, and it's so gorgeous. And it's like you never would think that care and attention would be given to that kind of property for that kind of release, and that people would want it and they'd want to have that copy. But like the stuff that they've been putting out is really beautiful, and they're interviewing people. I laughed because, like most Empire movies and Full Moon movies, like Sorority Babes and the Slimeball Bolorama is like 72 minutes long. There is a 2-hour behind the scenes.
I know, it's amazing.
I'm like the behind the scenes, and it's such a like unpolished, which I think is even better, where it starts and it's just Dave Dakota with a mustache, by the way, which
right. Yeah.
Just talking to the camera, and it literally is like somebody's camcorder footage of while they were making the movie. It's so fun, it's so playful. It's not even like edited or given like a title card or anything. It's just like you're ripping someone's VHS footage, and it's awesome. Yeah. And I love the fact that a lot of these, like, I just feel like you have higher boutiques like your Shout Factory, Kino Lorber. I mean, these are all, a lot of these things, they feel to me when you get them and they get this like incredible attention. And Arrow too. I mean, Arrow puts out stuff, beautiful stuff. It's like, to me, that's my like genre Criterion collection. It's like,
well, it is. They give them the Criterion treatment. I mean, and you have to understand too. I mean, like from my perspective, it's been interesting. Like talking about visual vengeance. I mean, like, because my first releases were like Camp Blood was one of the first ones in '99, and then I did movies for Brain Damage, or Death Factory, and Goth, and things like that. And most of the distributors and by the way, were funding these movies. That was a completely different system back then. They did not do extras. They would you'd make the movie, while you're shooting it, you already know when it's coming out. They've already made ad slicks. They've already contacted video stores. You're shooting a movie in the summer. It's coming out in November, no pressure. And they would barely do any extras, or maybe a little bit. Like Brain Damage would do a little bit. I think they were smarter with that. They followed Charlie's model more with the branding and also with the extras. But most of these distributors, they wouldn't do anything. I mean, you didn't even know your movie was coming out until after you saw it on the shelf. And you'd be lucky if your name was on the packaging or if it was spelled correctly. And that was how everyone was treated back then. Everyone who made mid to low range, low budget horror movies or genre movies. And everyone just was used to that, So it's incredibly cool to see them now it's almost like having the movie has easily is like a second life. I would definitely call it a second life, maybe more than a second life. I mean, in many cases, these movies, nobody's ever heard of them. I mean, I know what they are because, I've been in this world since the late 90s, but like a lot of people, casual fans, let's just say, or even people who are not just casual fans, they still haven't heard of all this stuff because it just was under released and undercovered because the magazines wouldn't cover it either. Or if they covered it, they said it sucked. That was Fangoria and Rue Morgan, all that, very snobby, yet some of these films have huge cult followings now, anyway, but I've got a lot of things that are kind of moving through the pipeline under like what you're talking about. And it's really cool to see that happen. I mean, it feels like your movie's and that means a lot nowadays because everything is, shrinking. And yet the physical media thing is blowing up and people are appreciating the boutique releases. And so that's just kind of how things have evolved, if you will.
Yeah.
And even I'm amazed sometimes with some of the things that Visual Vengeance or somebody comes up with and goes, "Hey, we're putting this out." And I'm going, "I've never heard of that movie before."
Yeah. Yeah.
How have I never heard? If I haven't heard of it, then I
They're
can only
really like
imagine.
crate digging. Yeah. They're really like,
Yeah, they are.
looking
They
for something,
are.
yeah.
But they've got like I said, they've got a lot, and it's going to keep going. You know, they're going to keep doing stuff. So we've got a few that are like basically just about done coming up from them. I've also got things that are from me. I've got things I made before I moved here, horror movies and stuff like actually Vinegar Syndrome. You mentioned them. I've got a movie called The Pact that came out through Saturn's Core. That's like a beach zombie movie that I did, a supernatural horror film that I did in Virginia Beach. And that's something that was like my director's sample when I moved here. But it was never commercially released. But now it's out there on Blu-ray.
That's amazing.
So
that's exciting.
and people like it too. I'm kind of amazed because you're almost cringing. What are people going to think of this thing? Because it's I made it in '95, and video. Well, a lot of people seem to like it. Not everybody, but a fair number of people appreciate.
But Brad, in the beginning you mentioned that you were an author, and I have to give you props for Neon Nightmares, which is one of my favorite books of the last couple years.
Jeez.
If you know anything about me, is that I love a seedy erotic thriller. Like it is a genre that I always gravitate towards. If I can find a movie within that genre, and I think even within subgenres of that, I always am like willing to give one of those movies a shot. And I love movies so this book is called Neon Nightmares, LA Thrillers of the 1980s. I love 1980s LA movies. I love 1980s New York movies. Probably my two favorite time periods to set a movie in. And when I saw that this book existed, obviously I'm a huge fan. Steve too, I know, is a fan of Body Double. The cover is the cover of Body Double there. And I was like, all right, I love the fact that this is kind of like archived, that somebody's doing kind of a deep dive into all of these films. And there's so many of them. And I think you can kind of play, I don't want to say fast and loose, but you get to decide what you're including in the umbrella. And I like the way you set the book up, where it first talks a little bit about LA, then you get into like neo-noirs, well, a little bit about LA noirs to begin with, then neo-noirs. And then it gets more into just the ones that are more sort of procedural. And then there's the ones that are more like erotic, and there's ones that have horror elements. And I just love the fact that somebody took the time to write a book that dives deep into this subgenre. So I guess my first question here would be, when did you first get the inspiration to start that book? And then also would be, if you could only pick like 2 or 3 of the movies you cover in that book as like desert island movies, what would they be?
Oh, geez. Well, I mean, in terms of the inspiration for the book, it comes from me being a fan, like you just said. I'm a fan of that, which I didn't know was a genre, but what kind of happened was I wrote this. Neon Nightmares is my second book. And my first book is a book called Terror in the Desert, which is all about desert thrillers like The Hitcher, The Hills Have Eyes, movies like that. I wrote that book when did that come out? I guess that was published in 2018 or 2019. Anyway, and you get to a point where you write a book like similar type of book, kind of an encyclopedia of that subgenre. When you do something like that, sometimes you want like a palate cleanser. When you just watch movies for fun, you want to see other kind of movie, completely different kind of movie. So I had all these, I always have, tapes, DVDs sitting around that I haven't seen. And I started watching just randomly movies like The Angel, like the original Angel, Avenging Angel. And then I started watching other things. And like, these are ones I hadn't seen before, but I was like, always kind of liked movies like that. I always like 80s, LA movies. And I started watching more and more of those as a palate cleanser. And then I was like, wait a minute, is there a genre here? Like, is this a whole nother book? And this is while I'm finishing up one book, So then I literally started really compiling the list, and I'm like, there is a book here. And I've seen like more than half of these, but I actually like to not have seen all these things because it's more fun for me to experience them like you would, like you just watch it for the first time, And so I compiled the list, then I sat on it. And then and I started compiling materials. And then what happened was 2020 and COVID hit. And I had time on my hands. I mean, we were posting one movie, but that wasn't taking up all my time. And I was like, okay, I'm going to start writing this book. So, that's how it started. But I've been a fan of these movies since I was a kid, because I grew up with movies like Fletch and, Die Hard, The Terminator. To Live and Die in LA is easily one of my favorite movies ever made. In fact, that would probably be on my list. What did you say? Top five LA thrillers?
Two or three, but five is a nice round number.
Yeah.
To Live and Die in LA is fantastic.
I mean,
I must ashamedly admit I have not seen it yet. So
well, now
on my list.
This is my recommendation to you. If nothing else comes out of this conversation, I would say watch that movie. That is definitely up there. I actually really love Vice Squad, the original Vice Squad, or the original.
Oh, hell yeah.
Vice Squad with
Wings Hauser.
The inimitable Wings Hauser is incredible. That's one I saw more recently too. Honestly, like I didn't grow up with Vice Squad. I just when I saw it, it blew me away. Look, Body Doubles obviously would have to be on the list. That's just an incredible Hall of Mirrors, self-reflexive, extravaganza. That's my favorite De Palma film, and definitely on my favorite. So those are some. I mean, there's so many good ones, and that's why I wrote the book. Miracle Mile is another one that comes to mind, which is a kind of an apocalyptic, pre-apocalypse, not post-apocalypse, but pre-apocalypse movie.
Yeah.
But that's why I broke the book down into all those subgenres, the categories, because there were so many that you had to kind of do that and figure out what goes where and where to
right. Like you want to cover it all. And that's kind of like when we were coming up with the idea for this show, it was like it was like, oh, we should do Full Moon. And then we thought about it. It's like, okay, well, if we do Full Moon, we can't talk about Reanimator. So we have to make it
right. Yeah, you have to have a cutoff, because that's so many movies right there. It's tons. So.
And then it's like, oh well, okay, but then if we do that, we can't talk about Tourist Trap, because we need to do like the just Charles Band productions, and then what about all these like little weird subdivisions? And it just kept growing and growing, and it's like it's like total like you can't have. It's funny to me, the thing Tubi, which we sing the praises of Tubi all the time.
Sure.
Tubi has been really good at this, because there's been movies popping up in my recommended based on stuff that I've watched. And two movies that I saw recently that you talk about in the book, but I had kind of forgotten because there's just so many names of movies. And they, for whatever reason, reading the book, the names weren't like impactful. But then I saw them as like these suggested movies, and I was like, "Oh man, these are like LA set, or
what were they?
And so one of them was the movie Slam Dance.
Okay, that's an interesting movie
with Tom Hulce and Virginia Madsen.
Yeah. Yep.
I had never even heard of it, and what I liked about that one was it was really weirdly stylish. It was kind of a movie where it was almost like. It reminded me like of an Albert Pune movie, in that stuff was happening that didn't quite make sense. Like every scene played as if there was a chunk of exposition left out.
Right.
And it was like, but it was so hyper stylized that I was fixated watching it. And the other one was Club Life.
Oh, I love
with Dee Wallace.
I love Club Life. I like Club Life more than Slam Dance. Club Life. I mean, Norman Vane.
King of the City is what that one was called.
Club Life that movie needs a Blu-ray. That movie needs to come out from Vinegar Syndrome or somebody, because I love that film. And I'm not saying it's a perfect movie, but it's so about Hollywood, and it gets to some real truisms, actually. All of Norman Vane's movies are interesting. The Black Room is one I would highly recommend too. The Black Room, that came out on Blu-ray a few years ago. I was so happy about that. His movies are kind of largely lost. Like they're almost all like relegated to VHS. You know? Except for Frightmare, which is an interesting movie too. It's also, all his films are about the industry, all about Hollywood. He also did a movie called Midnight with Lynn Redgrave, which is kind of a horror hostess, kind of Elvira type woman, embroiled in a murder mystery. And anyway, all interesting movies.
And for fans of our show, if you watch Frightmare, you'll see a very young Jeffrey Combs.
That's right. Yeah. I'll tell you a Jeffrey Combs story.
Oh, please do.
About Frightmare. On Spoiler, he was in Spoiler. Okay, there were a lot of people in that. Meg Foster, there were all kinds of cool people in that. Jeffrey Combs was down there, and he was worked for a few days, and so I had to go over and talk to him and tell him what a fan I was. And somehow I mentioned Frightmare, which may or may not have been the best movie to mention, but he said, so you know what? He's like, you know how I got cast in Frightmare? He's like, they had a severed head prop that looked like mine. And that's why they put me in the movie. That's what he told me.
See, y'all, sometimes it's just luck. Sometimes it's just luck of the draw. Be in the right place with the right prosthetic head.
There are a lot of actually band alumni in that, because Luka Berkovich is in the movie as an actor, and then he ended up being in directed Ghoulies later on. But
that's so fun. That's kind of like the B movie version of like the Lana Turner story,
Right.
Yeah, you're not just getting discovered in a mold shop. You're severed
head prop. But
that's so funny.
Yeah, so that's so all those films are interesting. And actually, I do like when they come up on streaming right now. At least they're streaming it somewhere, because when I wrote the book, when I wrote Neon Nightmares, a lot of those movies weren't even streaming. They were just kind of like, I had to find tapes, or people would get me rips from wherever. I had a few friends that would get me stuff that was really rare. Early PM Entertainment, or what we call City Lights, actually more. Which the City Lights stuff is actually way more interesting than PM, if you want to make a distinction. The City Lights movies are weird, like quirky and weird, and uglier too. The PM films are slicker. You probably know this anyway. I mean, if you're talking about Pune and everything, then you probably know about PM. Yeah, it was fun to read, and I love hearing from people that enjoyed it, because I had fun writing it, and I didn't think anyone had ever done anything like that before, so I feel like I should do it. So I'm glad you liked it, and you're still finding movies from it. So
yeah, no, I love resources like that. Like if my shelves are filled primarily with books that are like encyclopedic collections of genres, or behind the scenes of something incredibly specific that kind of like what it led to getting the show started, of reading Dave J's It Came from the Video Aisle, like Steve had too, and just being like, Full Moon Features. I mean, on the surface, you look at that and you're talking hundreds of movies. For someone to sit down and say, like, I need to kind of tell the story of this company while covering all these different movies through the different phases of the company, is such a great idea, because there are people who really enjoy niche content.
Yeah. That's a huge effort.
All of our listeners, I would say.
Yeah, that's a huge effort to take on that. I at one point, I didn't end up going through with it, but I at one point thought, this is before Dave J's book came out, about doing a book about just full moon in Romania only. Cool. And I remember sitting down, I knew Sam Irvin, and I remember sitting down with Sam Irvin, having a really long talk that I recorded, and a few other people. And then it just became too much of a beast. I think what I realized from that experience was if I'm going to write a book, I'd rather just write a book of more like reviews that I can just sort of do it my own. Because making a movie, you do it with a lot of people. So writing a book like that is sort of like making a movie, only it's a book instead. And I didn't feel like putting that kind of effort into after a while, I was like, there's so many people there's people I know, and then there's people I'd have to get a hold of. I remember talking to Ted a little bit about it, and some people want to jump in and do that with you, and other people are kind of more harder to get a hold of. And I just sort of said, it's okay. I'll let someone else write that book. And I think Dave J did write that book. And there's been a lot of even, Stuart Gordon had his autobiography since then. And, there's been some other cool books.
The Stuart Gordon book is great.
I love that book.
Naked Terrific. Theater and Uncensored Horror.
Terrific book. Yeah. I worked on a Stuart Gordon movie too after.
Oh, which one?
A movie called Progeny. It was actually Yuzna directed it.
Yeah.
I worked on a few movies.
I
worked on a few movies for Brian Yuzna. I guess that's another Charlie Band connection, isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah.
Worked on The Dentist 2. This is more like an effects department. These are all jobs I did after Phantom Town.
Oh, that's right. I saw The Dentist 2 in your filmography, and I remember just thinking, the Dentist 2 being like the VHS cover that scared the living shit out of anyone who was 12 years old at that time.
I was probably putting the teeth in that girl that's on the cover. That was kind of, I was doing like effects assistant work. I was actually working with Anthony Ferrante, who's, gone on to direct some movies, and he was effects coordinator on those Yuzna films at the time. And so that was really fun because you'd have like 6 or 7 different effects shops all doing different, creatures, aliens, all this kind of stuff, and managing them, going to their shops. As you can imagine, this was also good for me later on because I would hit those guys up, occasionally for, hey, do you have somebody who can do this or that or the other?
Mhm.
And that's actually how I would get my effects guys sometimes, was from later on, the connections I made on those movies. But they were just fun to work on. I wasn't thinking about any of that at the time. I was just, Yuzna was very cool. Stuart Gordon came down because he had co-written the script. And I worked on a few as Wishmaster too. A lot of those type of jobs for a while. So that was interesting too, to kind of see that part of the business,
Oh, that's amazing.
Those
See,
are all all my early credits.
So I could potentially keep you here for 12 hours, but unfortunately we do have to close out at the moment. I have to go get ready for some dinner stuff. But this has been so cool. I've been loving hearing all of these kind of in the trenches stories from the world of Full Moon and the B movie horror world. You have so many movies to your credit. You have a really, really robust IMDb, which of course everybody knows is completely and 100% accurate at all times and should be treated as gospel. But you've got an amazing IMDb for people to check out. What specifically, if you had to narrow down like 1-2 movies that you would absolutely tell people to highlight from your own filmography, where would you send them, and what movies would those be?
Well, I mentioned Plaguers earlier. That's my biggest budget movie. It's like a sci-fi horror movie with Steve Railsback. You can see that talk about Tubi. It's on Tubi. It's actually on a lot of places, pretty much everywhere. And it's on Blu-ray, which we did a lot of cool extras for that. So Plaguers, if you like sci-fi horror, like 80s sci-fi horror, like practical effects and stuff like that, gooey practical effects, that's a good movie to watch. If you want like edgier, darker stuff, there's a movie I did called Goth, which is also on Tubi and other places. And that's more like a dark psychological kind of horror film with 3 characters on the road. And there's all kinds of awful stuff going on. It gets progressively worse and worse and worse, between these 3 characters on the road at like all night ride through LA. That movie's turned into kind of a cult movie over the years and inspired a lot of comic books and music and other things like that. Those are 2. And then since it's my newest movie that's starting to play festivals, Transylvania Tapes, coming full circle. That's a movie that we've just finished it. I shot it last year. We just finished post on it. It's a found footage. I describe it as a found footage Euro horror movie.
Okay.
Because it's found footage, but it's not like, it's got more to it than that. And it's very atmospheric. We filmed it all on location in Bucharest and Transylvania. And we did get some Full Moon alumni in front of the camera for that. So and it's interesting, that's just starting to make the rounds. So it'll be interesting to see what people think. It's the first found footage movie I've done. And I probably wouldn't have done one if I couldn't have done this one, because I just feel like it's a more interesting angle on it. But this was a movie we wanted to make for 20 years. It's kind of a passion project for Josefina and I, to make a movie in Romania and show things that you haven't seen. Some things you have seen before, maybe in some of the early Full Moon movies, like especially the subspecies, which are the best. Those and Vampire Journals are the best in terms of showing the city and showing the architecture and all of that. It's very expensive to shoot there now, so you can't really film those kind of things anymore. But all those places are still there, and you will see some of them in our film. And like I said, you'll see some actors too that are in those. Like Jan Hajduk, who's in all the subspecies movies. He's Lieutenant Marin.
Yeah, of course.
I
he's
told
in quite a
Joseph,
few of the movies we cover.
Yeah, he's in a lot of those. He was in Phantom Town, and I knew who he was because I was a fan of him. And I said, hey, let's you're Lieutenant Marin, you're in subspecies. So anyway, I was just see him every once in a while. Every time we go back to Romania, I'd see him. And then I told Josephine, I said, if there's any way we can get Jan Hajduk in this, please,
Cool.
So we got Jan Hajduk. We spent a day with him and filmed at his house, and he cooked us dinner and all that. Of course, you can imagine he has great stories from all this stuff. And
Sure.
yeah, and then we have another actor named Gabi Spahiu, who is in Phantom Town and other full moon movies, and he's also in a lot of other horror films. The movie High Tension, he's in that. He's in a lot of other.
Oh, cool! Yeah, that's
good Romania. Yeah, he's in that. And so anyway, so and these are people we knew from back in the day, and we kept in touch with off and on. We didn't know if we'd ever make a movie there or not, but we kept in touch with them because we're just friends. But I think it creates a nice connective tissue. Even if nobody else gets it, you guys would get it, but if nobody else gets it, it's okay because it matters to us. We wanted them to be in the film.
Really well said, and our fans will get it. Listeners of the show will get it. They'll make
I
that
posted in the full moon group, and people did or one of the full moon groups, and they were like, "Oh yeah, well, we want to see this." Jan Hajduk. They know who Jan Hajduk is.
Yeah,
they sure do.
So.
And anyone who's listening, I would definitely recommend any of the movies that Brad just highlighted. Totally, I would say look down his IMDb, listen to his recommendations. You can order Scream Queen through Vinegar Syndrome, and definitely I would say Neon Nightmares if that LA Thrillers is something that interests you. If you're a fan of those kind of movies. If you're a fan of this particular show that we bring to you every single week, the best way to show us is to go on to Apple Podcasts or Spotify, leave a 5-star rating, maybe a brief review if you feel so inclined to do so. It just helps us reach a wider audience. We update on Instagram at @PuppetMasters_CastleFreaks, and you can follow me also at _Giallo_Jared. We're on Blue Sky. We put stuff in the Facebook group. There's YouTube audio versions of the show, maybe video at one point, who knows, maybe. But for now, it's hard because Steve has so much cool stuff going on, including some new writing and another podcast. Steve, what else are you always working tirelessly on?
So much. In addition to this show, I'm also the host of a show called Cinema Arcade. That's cinema and arcade mashed together into one beautiful portmanteau. We are talking about movies and the video games based on those movies to see how they contrast, compare. And it gives us a whole wide range of things to talk about, including, and I don't know if either of you know this, Pumpkinhead 2 Blood Wings, directed by Jeff Burr, which does have a video game adaptation. Maybe one of the more obscure games that we're going to talk about. But Jared, I'll be sure to get you on that one in particular.
Hell yeah.
I did not know that, and I've never heard Jeff mention that either. So
it may be vaporware at this point, but I'm pretty sure there is a very obscure PC game based on Pumpkinhead 2. So I'll see if I can find that anywhere. So it's a full motion video game that's been categorized as kind of a Doom ripoff. It's locked on MS-DOS, but I think it's probably you can find it in like a abandonware site somewhere. But that's one of the weird things that we're going to be looking at, and you can find that wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to tune into us later this week. As promised, we are still talking about Trancers: The Whole Deathly Affair, which is a re-edited version of Trancers 4 and 5.
With Jan Hajduk.
With Jan Hajduk,
starring Jan Hajduk.
With get him in there with some Tim Thomerson, and you cannot go wrong. It'll be a lot of fun. So we'll be back to talk about that this Friday, and we will see you all then.
Cool.
Thank you again to Brad Sykes, and we'll see you all next time when we cover The Whole Deathly Affair.